Welcome to the Quiet Scientist. I'm so glad you're here. Whether you've arrived tucked into bed, curled up on a couch, or resting quietly on a train ride home, thank you for choosing to spend a gentle moment with me. Tonight, we explore something small, strange and sudden, and almost silly, a fleeting feeling that passes through your body before you even know how to name it. That odd little shiver, the one that sometimes catches you by surprise just after you've finished peeing. Maybe it starts at the base of your spine. Maybe it travels up through your shoulders or causes your head to twitch just slightly. Maybe it makes you pause, blink, and wonder, what was that? And then it's gone, like a ripple on a still pond, already fading before your mind can quite catch it. You're not alone in this. You've probably felt it before, maybe more than once, maybe often. It might make you chuckle, or raise an eyebrow, or simply accept it as one of those odd things your body does without asking permission. I hope this story helps you relax, or even drift off to sleep. But fair warning, it might be just strange enough to keep your curiosity awake for a little while longer. If it does, don't worry. You'll walk away with a quiet new fact to tuck into your pocket. Maybe something to whisper at breakfast, or to remember the next time your body twitches unexpectedly. Before we drift too far into tonight's story, a soft like or subscribe would mean a lot to me, and it helps the quiet scientist continue whispering into the stillness. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now: midnight in Michigan, early evening in Seoul, a foggy dawn somewhere along the coast. I love knowing where this voice reaches. Of course, tonight's journey is not medical advice, just a slow and wondering reflection on a moment your body knows well, even if science still has questions of its own. Take a breath with me if you like, a long inhale through the nose and a sighing exhale out through the mouth. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the corners of your thoughts begin to soften. And now, let's begin. Long before people had names for reflexes or systems, long before medical books or white coats or Latin words, there were bodies, and those bodies had bladders, and those bladders filled with water from streams and rivers and rain and emptied under stars, behind bushes in moonlit silence. The act of releasing what no longer served. It has always been part of life. Quiet, private, essential, and even back then. Surely, someone noticed that strange moment, that little twitch at the end, that flicker of a shiver that wasn't cold, wasn't fear, wasn't joy, just something unnamed, unasked for. No one carved it into stone tablets. No one sang lullabies about it. But still, that ripple likely existed, whispered in bone and breath, passed down like an old melody that doesn't need words. The centuries passed, and people invented names for the body's secrets. They mapped nerves like constellations, gave letters to chemicals, and sorted strange sensations into categories. And yet, the shiver after you pee, it never quite got its own chapter. Because how do you study something that happens for only a second? That doesn't hurt, doesn't help, doesn't even stick around long enough to grab. How do you explain a reflex that arrives like a sudden breeze and vanishes just as fast? But still, it stayed. In quiet moments, in tiled bathrooms, and forest paths, people have kept noticing the curious little shiver. Tonight, we wondered about it too. We won't rush. We won't solve it like a puzzle or trap it in a test tube. Instead, we'll follow it gently, step by step, like a bird hopping across wet sand, like a trail of candlelight flickering down a long hallway. We begin with the body, with its many layers of sensation and surprise, and we start to imagine that your body, yes, yours, may be more full of secret conversations than you ever realized. Your nervous system hums like a hidden orchestra, even now, right now, signals flowing through you in endless rivers, slowing your heartbeat, adjusting your pupils, twitching a toe you weren't thinking about. Some of these signals come from your brain, others never make it there. They live in the tangle of your spine, in the nerves that reach down to places you rarely think about. Your bladder, for instance. The bladder is not just a sac, it's a smooth muscle, coiled like a balloon deep inside your lower abdomen. It holds water with quiet patience until a threshold is reached, and then it speaks, not in words, of course, but in pressure, in signals, in pulses that rise up from the pelvic floor, carried along nerve highways to your brainstem, to your cortex, to the parts of you that can decide now is a good time. You might not notice these messages consciously, but they guide your behavior all the same. They are gentle, persistent, rhythmic, and when the moment comes, they ease you into release. And that's when something odd sometimes happens. As the stream stops, as the body settles, as the final drop falls and the breath releases, a flicker, a shiver, as if a switch has been flipped. But you didn't know you had that switch in the first place. Science has noticed this moment too. It doesn't have a proper name, not one that people say out loud at dinner. But sometimes it's called a post-micturition convulsion syndrome, which sounds far too serious for something so silly. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't warn, it just is. And for some, it's rare. For others, it happens almost every time. A quiet punctuation mark at the end of a sentence your body has been writing all on its own. In the sections to come, we'll explore what this little shiver might mean, where it starts, why it feels so strange, why it happens more to some people than others, and whether it matters at all. But for now, you're here, your body is here, and together we'll listen more closely to what it's been trying to say, with muscles and nerves and ripples of sensation that often go unnoticed. There's nothing to fix, nothing to fear, just a soft and quiet story waiting to be heard. A mystery so small you could almost sleep right through it. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. The way your body toggles between states, like a lamp gently dimming before sunrise. You stretch, you shift, you sigh, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet change unfolds without your permission, without your awareness. It's subtle, like a room warming by a single candle, but it's there, the transition from one state of being to another. Your body is always shifting, from wakefulness to rest, from stillness to action, from fullness to release. Every moment, it balances opposing forces, speed and slowness, warmth and coolness, tension and ease. And tucked among those invisible rhythms is the way your nervous system orchestrates the show. Two parts share the stage. One that calls you into motion, lights up your heart, sharpens your senses, and another that tells you to breathe slowly, digest deeply, let go. These two, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, take turns like dancers in a slow duet. And each time they change places, you feel something, not always a shiver, sometimes just a blink, a yawn, a drop in heart rate. But once in a while, the handoff is not quite seamless. Once in a while, as one steps back and the other steps forward, the transition carries a little tremor, like a curtain swaying as the scene shifts. And you, standing there at the sink, zipping up or washing your hands, feel the flick of it, that electric ripple that feels like it came from nowhere at all. But it didn't come from nowhere. It came from that delicate point of switch, from parasympathetic calm to sympathetic return, because in order to pee, your body leans into softness, your bladder muscles relax, your pelvic floor loosens, your internal tension fades, and in that moment, your body leans into the rest and digest rhythm of being alive. But then, as soon as you finish, the system reawakens. The sympathetic nerves, the ones that keep you upright, alert, and ready to act, come humming back, not like an alarm, not loud or violent, just a gentle re entry. And sometimes, as they take the wheel again, they bring with them a reflex. That's what a shiver is. After all, a reflex. A small command that tells your muscles to fire for no apparent reason. Sometimes to warm you, sometimes to startle you, sometimes for reasons we haven't fully figured out yet. And in this case, perhaps simply to say, we're back online. Your nervous system is ancient, older than words, older than ideas. It doesn't need to know why it's doing what it does, only that it must. It doesn't have to be efficient or elegant. It just needs to keep you alive. And part of that means restoring balance quickly, even if it's a little messy, even if it comes with a twitch. There's something oddly beautiful about this, isn't there? The idea that your body holds an entire conversation without you, that it's constantly translating between opposites, silence and sensation, tension and calm, and sometimes the translation stutters. A shiver might be just that, a hiccup in communication, a momentary echo from the transition between two ancient systems. And perhaps that's why it feels so strange, because your conscious mind isn't invited. It didn't request the shiver, it wasn't warned, and so it stands there, blinking in the mirror, wondering why a perfectly ordinary moment just turned into something unexpectedly electric. That's part of why the sensation lingers in memory, not because it hurts or alarms you, but because it surprises you, because it comes unannounced, like a breeze in a closed room, and your mind, always curious, tries to assign it meaning. Was it the cold air? Was it the tile floor? Was it something wrong? Most likely. It was just a shift, a gentle flip of a switch that's always been there. A return to the balance your body keeps so well until it draws your attention, just for a second, with a shiver, and in that moment, you are reminded that you are not a machine. You are not just inputs and outputs, calculations and plans. You are rhythm, you are flow, you are a symphony of hidden movements, and sometimes you feel them. So let yourself marvel at that, at the way something so fleeting can still be felt, at how your body speaks in quiet pulses, and how every so often you catch one. That's what we're doing here tonight, after all, catching the things that are easy to miss, honoring the little mysteries, listening not to solve, but simply to notice. There's no rush. You're already doing it just by lying still, breathing softly, being here and somewhere in your body. Even now, systems are shifting, lights dimming, muscles relaxing, signals humming through you, reminding each part what to do next. Perhaps you won't feel a shiver tonight, or perhaps you will. Perhaps the next time it happens, you'll smile. You'll remember this quiet conversation, this small moment of recognition, and instead of brushing it off, you'll nod as if your body just said hello in its own odd way. It helps sometimes to imagine your body as a village at night, not a loud or bustling place, but a quiet one lit softly by lanterns, hushed by wind, inhabited by systems that whisper to one another beneath the stillness. The villagers are your nerves. They don't sleep, they don't shout, but they do speak in pulses, in signals, in quiet agreements made moment to moment. Among them are two of the oldest storytellers in your body's long history. The sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, not enemies, not opposites, just two parts of the same ancient language. One speaks of action, the other of rest. You already know their rhythm, even if you've never named them. When you jump at a sudden sound or feel your heart race as you walk into a room of strangers, that's the sympathetic system speaking. When you melt into warm bathwater or sigh beneath a heavy blanket, that's the parasympathetic reply. These two voices trade places thousands of times a day, sometimes gently, like dancers changing positions, sometimes sharply, like birds startled from a wire. Their conversation is constant, keeping your heart steady, your breath aligned, your digestion moving, your temperature in balance. And when it comes to going to the bathroom, this conversation becomes especially delicate. To urinate, to release, your body must allow itself to be vulnerable. It's not just the letting go of liquid, it's a moment of surrender, a pause in defense. Your muscles ease, your mind relaxes, and behind that release is a soft chorus of parasympathetic signals, soothing, slow, and permissive. But the moment you finish, the moment the last drop leaves your body and you begin to rise again, the tone shifts. The sympathetic system, waiting politely in the wings, returns to its post, ready to bring back tension, readiness, awareness. And sometimes that return is not seamless. It's not a conversation that fades in gently, but one that presses the button too quickly. And that's when you might feel it, a shiver, a twitch, a brief ripple, as if your body is testing its own systems again, as if it's saying, all clear, we can stand guard now. This ripple, so easy to miss, is not always caused by something outside of you. It might not be the cold floor, it might not be the sound of a door opening. It might simply be your own internal voices, trading places, the sympathetic system reasserting itself after a moment of calm, brushing past the parasympathetic like wind against silk. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to last. It only needs to happen, just once, briefly, like a nod from one system to another, and you feel it, sometimes in your spine, sometimes behind your eyes, sometimes in your shoulders, or even your chest. It's not the kind of shiver that runs deep with fear or delight. It's shallower than that, a surface signal, almost humorous in how sudden it is, but within it is a message. The nervous conversation has resumed. You're upright again. You're safe. The village lights flicker back on. The systems that were paused have resumed their work. And as strange as it may feel, this entire sequence is completely ordinary. It's part of the blueprint. The nervous system was never designed for elegance. It was designed for survival. If its signals sometimes jostle each other, if its transitions sometimes trigger little ripples, that's just part of being human. Even now, as you lie still and listen, your parasympathetic system is likely in control. It slows your heart, deepens your breath, quiets your thoughts. It tells your muscles that it's okay to release, that it's okay to sink, that the world can wait. And yet, the sympathetic system is still nearby. It always is, ready to bring you back into movement, ready to rise with you when morning comes. The two systems are not at war. They are partners in a lifelong dance, and their timing is everything. Sometimes they step perfectly in sync, and sometimes one bumps the other. No, it's just a little too soon. That's the pea shiver. A tiny misstep in the handoff. A sudden reminder that your body is more alive than you often realize. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to name it every time. But the next time it visits you, in the morning light, in the dim hallway, in the quiet of your evening routine, perhaps you'll pause for half a second. Perhaps you'll smile. Perhaps you'll say, "Ah, there you are again," like greeting an old friend who never stays long because your body remembers things your mind forgets, and your nervous system is always listening, always speaking, always shifting, even now in this stillness. The conversation continues, not in words, not in logic, but in the warm current running beneath your skin, in the weight of your limbs, in the ease of your breathing. The shiver was never something to explain away. It was something to notice, a moment where two worlds met, rest and readiness, and you were simply caught in the space between them. And isn't that beautiful? That even a body's smallest mistake, its most fleeting twitch, can become a doorway to wonder. Let it be, let it fade, let it ripple out like breath in fog, like the memory of music after the last note plays. You are not broken, you are not malfunctioning, you are simply alive. You might think of your bladder as just a vessel, a container to be emptied and forgotten, but it's more than that. It's a communicator, a messenger, a quiet participant in a very old relationship, one it has maintained with your brain for as long as humans have walked upright, and far longer still, a partnership shaped by evolution, refined by necessity, and carried out in the background, day after day, without applause or acknowledgement. This relationship is not flashy. It doesn't demand attention the way your heartbeat might after a run, or your stomach might after skipping lunch, but it is steady, constant, precise, and incredibly polite. It whispers instead of shouting. It suggests rather than commands. As your bladder fills, it gently reaches out. It begins to stretch, almost imperceptibly. Within its walls are stretch receptors, small, sensitive cells that detect changes in volume. They don't send alarms, not at first. They simply inform the spinal cord, "We're getting full down here." And the spinal cord, that trusted courier between brain and body, relays the message upward, but your brain is busy, always busy, so the message waits. The bladder continues to fill, and when the pressure rises, so too does the urgency of the signal. Perhaps now, it asks, soon, if you don't mind. And eventually, your brain responds, not just to the need, but to the setting, the timing, the context. Is there privacy? Is there time? Is there safety? Only when all the checks are met does the brain send its reply, yes, now. Then, and only then, does the bladder contract. The urethral sphincters, those ring like muscles, relax, and release begins. It's not a chaotic event, it's a dance, one that requires coordination between dozens of nerves, muscles, and signals, all moving together like the gears of a clock. And even more curious, this act is one of the only bodily functions that you can both control voluntarily and allow to run automatically. It's an in between state, a liminal act, like breathing. It can be conscious or unconscious. And perhaps that's why it sometimes surprises you, because it lies so delicately between control and surrender. In this dance, the brain and the bladder do something even more interesting. They time the return, the moment when the bladder empties and the body prepares to shift again. That final phase is less discussed, less understood, but it's there. The ending of the act, that's where the pee shiver often happens, because as the bladder signals completion and as the brain processes the shift, something else may be triggered. It's a flicker of feedback, a burst of crosstalk between nerves. Not loud, not intentional, just incidental, a leftover spark in the system as the body transitions once more. This isn't a flaw, it's not a mistake. It's simply what happens when two systems that normally live in harmony reach the end of a shared task. And because this task involves muscles in your lower abdomen, muscles also connected to the spine, the hips, even the back, it's no surprise that any stray signal might ripple outward. The shiver doesn't originate in your bladder, but the ending of its message may be what nudges the next one to begin. You can think of it like a relay race. The bladder passes the baton, and in that moment, as the next runner picks up speed, there's a jolt, a flick of energy, a shiver. The muscles don't just switch off, they echo, just slightly, as the signal fades. It's fascinating, isn't it, that something so common, so quietly universal, still leaves us wondering? That despite centuries of study, despite scanning and sensors and observation, we still greet this little moment with a tilted head and a smile that says, "What was that?" Maybe that's because the shiver doesn't belong to one part of the body. Maybe it's the whole system acknowledging a transition, the way you might sigh when finishing a long letter, or stretch after standing still too long, a brief flicker to say, "That's done now." And there's something oddly comforting about that your body, in all its complex wiring, still finds ways to signal the end of a task, that your brain, ever attentive, receives these little alerts, not because they're vital, but simply because they exist. Not every signal must be useful. Some are just honest. This is where the line between biology and feeling begins to blur, where what is purely physical still manages to feel strangely emotional. the way a sigh can carry meaning, the way a heartbeat can betray excitement, the way a twitch, a flutter, a shiver can feel like a punctuation mark on a sentence written in nerves. And in the stillness after, your body resets, your brain files away the last message. The bladder rests again. The dialogue, paused for now, awaits the next chapter, hours from now or sooner when the story begins again. For now, there's only quiet, a lingering hum of activity beneath the skin, a warm pulse of balance being restored, a reminder that you are not just flesh and organs, but patterns and rhythms and relationships that extend across every part of you. Your bladder and your brain, old friends, still speaking, and you, in the middle of it all, are the listener. Even now, as you rest beneath your blanket or let your thoughts soften in the dim light, your body is balancing warmth. It's always doing this, adjusting, compensating, listening for tiny changes in temperature that your conscious mind never hears. Your skin might feel still, your breath steady, but beneath it all, there's a quiet dance between heat and cool, between comfort and reaction, a dance that might just play a role in that sudden little shiver you sometimes feel. After all, your body is built to notice even the smallest changes, not just in your environment, but within yourself. Shifts in pressure, position, temperature, even the subtle chill of air against damp skin. You don't need to walk into a snowstorm to trigger a response. Sometimes, all it takes is the tiniest difference. Picture this. You've just released. Your muscles begin to reset. The warmth from within your body, that gentle internal heat held in for a while, now flows out and down. It passes through you, leaves your skin, and enters the cooler air of the world around you. Even in a warm room, that shift can be detected. It's not about degrees, it's about contrast. Your nervous system is exquisitely tuned to contrast, and with that contrast, a reflex might follow. One theory, quiet, modest, not yet carved into scientific certainty, suggests that the pea shiver may come from your body sensing a small drop in internal warmth. A quick change, just enough to make your muscles twitch in response. A thermal reaction, a recalibration, the kind of thing your body does 100 times a day, most of which go unnoticed. But this one, this odd little tremor, happens during a moment of pause. A moment when you are still, when your body has just completed something, when your awareness, however briefly, is centered. That's why you feel it, why it surprises you. Not because it's big, but because it happens during stillness, a sudden tremble against a calm backdrop. Like a single note played in a silent hall, it resonates. You might have noticed it more in colder bathrooms, or in winter months, or when you're especially tired, or especially relaxed. That's not coincidence. When your baseline is low, when you're already conserving warmth, already leaning into quiet, even the tiniest disruption can ripple through your system. Your nervous system, always listening, always ready to act, takes that signal and responds. A shiver, not to make you warm again, necessarily, but to acknowledge the change. A flick of recognition, a test of the system. Are the muscles still working? Is everything still in balance? The shiver isn't a full body affair, not like the ones you feel when stepping into a chilly lake or standing under an open sky on a windy day. It's more like a flick at the base of the spine, a quiver between the shoulders, a quickening breath that vanishes as soon as it arrives. It may not even raise goosebumps, just a single second of awareness, and then it's gone. That's how your body works most of the time. It moves beneath your notice, keeping you warm, breathing you through sleep, adjusting your posture as you drift in thought, and then sometimes it gives you a glimpse, a moment where the system speaks louder than usual. There's something tender in that, something strangely endearing, that your body cares enough to notice even the smallest shift in temperature, that it has built in checks and balances, like secret guardians keeping the castle secure. And that shiver, that moment of recalibration, might be one of them, a protective reflex, subtle and ancient, that says, let's just make sure. It doesn't wait for you to ask. It doesn't explain itself. It just happens and then disappears into the warm fog of your next breath. You don't need to prove this theory right or wrong. It's not a test, not a diagnosis. It's just one of the many quiet possibilities. One of the soft hypotheses your body offers without needing you to answer. And in this quiet, this stillness, as you breathe and listen and simply exist, your body continues its quiet balancing act, not just of temperature, but of everything: hydration, heartbeat, muscle tone, even your thoughts. Perhaps the next time you feel that shiver, you'll think of it not as strange, but as natural, as expected, as something your body has always done. A small nod between systems, a tremble of transition, a thermal whisper in a body full of listening. And maybe, in that moment, you'll feel grateful, not for the shiver itself, but for the reminder that you are a being of sensation, that your body still knows how to adjust, that even when you're not paying attention, something inside you always is. So let yourself sink a little deeper into that awareness, into the warmth you're cultivating now, the quiet air on your skin, the soft exhale from your lips, the gentle weight of your limbs. This, too, is part of the balance, part of the conversation, part of what makes the human experience feel so mysteriously familiar, even when you don't ask for it, even when you don't understand it, even when it passes in a second and leaves no trace behind. Still, it mattered. Still, your body noticed. Still, it responded with the smallest, most peculiar of gifts: a shiver. You are older than your memories, older than your name, not just you exactly, but your body, the patterns it follows, the instincts it obeys. They go back so far that even your ancestors wouldn't recognize all of them. And yet, they are here, tucked into your bones, folded into your nerves, whispering with every blink, every sigh, every quiet little tremble. The shiver after urination might be one of these ancient whispers, not a modern anomaly, but a leftover from some deeper time, a time when survival wasn't about schedules or passwords or carefully worded emails, but about sensing threats and moving quickly, about staying alert in vulnerable moments. Because that's what releasing waste has always been: a vulnerable moment for early humans and animals before them. To stop, to turn inward, meant exposing oneself to danger. When your muscles let go, your awareness could not. You needed a system in place, something automatic, a mechanism that could gently suddenly reawaken your readiness once the moment had passed. The shiver, some believe, may be just that. Imagine a scene from deep time. A lone figure squats by the edge of a clearing. Their senses are dimmed for a moment, relaxed by the act of letting go. The body releases, the breath slows. But as soon as it's done, as soon as the body is emptied, there's a flick, a flash, a shiver. The muscles tighten again, the spine resets, the eyes refocus, and then they move back into the trees, back toward shelter, alert once more. That shiver might have been the transition, the switch from softness to vigilance, a primal wake up, not called by the conscious mind, but summoned by instinct, by the sympathetic nervous system rising like a quiet wave, nudging the body back into readiness. Today, there may be no predator in the bush, no rustling in the dark, but your nervous system doesn't know that. It only knows what it's known for thousands of generations, that a moment of release should be followed by a moment of alertness, just in case. And so, it sends the shiver. It doesn't ask whether you're safe in a locked bathroom or alone in the forest. It acts gently and instantly. The reflex is too old to question its relevance. It's like an ancient bell that still rings, long after the watchtower has crumbled. Other creatures likely have similar signals, small muscular resets after relieving themselves. But humans, with our upright posture and awareness of self, are especially good at noticing, especially good at wondering. You feel the shiver and pause. You think, "What was that?" you ask. You smile. You tell someone later, over coffee. "Isn't it weird how that happens?" And maybe you laugh. That, too, is part of the evolutionary journey, the way we turn reflexes into curiosity. The way a tremor becomes a question. It's not about finding a single answer. Evolution doesn't leave one clear explanation for every sensation. It leaves traces, possibilities, adaptations that stay with us even when the original danger is gone. The shiver might be one of those, like goosebumps when you're not actually cold, like the hiccup, a spasm of the diaphragm, possibly a leftover from our aquatic ancestors who once breathed through gills. Your body keeps these relics, not because they're useful, always, but because they haven't become harmful, and maybe they still serve you in ways you don't fully understand. That little shiver, that moment of reset, might prepare you to stand, to move, to return to your world. It might be your body's way of checking in with itself. Are we good? Can we go? It might even be a protective gesture, just in case, a reminder from biology that your softness is never left undefended for long. What a comforting thought, that even in your most private, most routine moments, your body is still working to keep you safe, that it remembers what you no longer need to, that it carries old lessons in its wiring, folded like letters passed from generation to generation. And what's more, your body doesn't mind if you notice. It doesn't mind if you wonder. If you treat the shiver as something strange and delightful, it welcomes your attention, not because it needs it, but because it knows you are learning to listen again. In modern life, it's easy to ignore these small things. The body becomes background noise, just something that carries you from task to task, from desk to dinner table to bed. But then, suddenly, a twitch, a flutter, a shiver, a ripple that reminds you, "I'm still here. I've always been here. You don't need to explain it away. You don't need to trace it to a perfect evolutionary tree. You can just let it be what it is, a flicker from the past, showing up in your present for no reason other than that it always has. And if you smile when it happens, that's just evolution meeting awareness. Two old friends nodding at each other, even now, as you breathe into the quiet. Your body holds those ancient blueprints. It runs them silently in the background, like forgotten songs still playing faintly in another room. You don't have to hear every note to know they're there. Let them play. Let them hum beneath your skin. Let the tremble come and go like wind across a field. You're not broken. You're not malfunctioning. You're remembering something older than memory. The shiver is not a mystery to be solved. It's a signal to be felt, an invitation to pause, to smile, to say softly, "Ah, there it is again," a flick from the past, a gentle echo in the body you call home. Beneath the surface of your thoughts, below the hum of your breath, far below the soft weight of your limbs, your spine lies like a quiet river. It doesn't speak in words, it doesn't shimmer or glow, but it listens, it carries, it relays. It is one of the oldest storytellers in your body, and perhaps the most silent of them all. Everything you feel, everything you move, everything your body senses and responds to, it flows through this braided column of nerves and bone. Your spine is not just a support beam, it is a passageway, a relay of ancient signals moving faster than thought. It doesn't need your awareness to function, it doesn't need your permission, but every so often you feel it at work, in a small spasm, a quick jolt, a sudden shiver, especially, perhaps, after you've released. Because somewhere deep in that moment, when your bladder empties and your body transitions, a message is carried not upward to your thoughts, but downward through your spine, a quiet ripple, a flicker of completion, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that ripple grows legs. It travels, it dances its way into a sudden contraction, a shiver. Scientists believe your spinal cord can process more than you might expect. It doesn't simply carry signals from brain to muscle like an obedient courier. It makes decisions. It manages reflexes. It performs its own quiet computations without ever involving the brain. And post-urination shivers, they might be born right there. Think of a light switch, one that's been slowly dimmed down during the relaxing process of urinating. Your parasympathetic system, gentle and slow, has been in charge, encouraging release, soothing the muscles, quieting the senses. But then the task is complete. The switch flips, and your spine, like a thoughtful assistant, takes the cue. It starts the return sequence, not dramatically, not deliberately, just a nudge, a contraction here, a muscle flicker there, a quick spinal reflex to say, "We're resetting now." This kind of reflex doesn't come from fear or temperature or even conscious thought. It's not a choice. It's not an emotion. It's something lower, quieter, the kind of mechanism you'd only notice when the world around you is still, when you're alone in a tiled room, hands on your belt, listening to the sound of water in a sink. When your thoughts are momentarily idle and your body's freed from focus reminds you that it's still full of secrets, that's when the shiver comes. Maybe it starts in your tailbone, Maybe it rides up your spine. Maybe it curls your shoulders inward or ripples across your chest. It doesn't last. It doesn't hurt. But it says something, not in language, but in rhythm, in movement, in the brief reunion of nerves and muscle and history. You might wonder why you notice it at all. Why such a small response? So automatic, feels so out of place. But the truth is, it's only noticeable because it's one of the few moments in your day when your nervous system acts entirely on its own, not in response to the world, but in response to itself. There's something sacred about that. The spine does this more often than you realize. When your foot jerks away from something hot before you even register pain, when your hand tightens just before a fall, when your muscles twitch in your sleep, these are the languages of the spine. Fast, efficient, wordless, and perhaps that shiver after peeing is just another sentence in that silent script, a line your body has always known how to write, a reflex so deeply encoded that even the brain doesn't bother to get involved. You may have heard of spinal reflex arcs, circuits that bypass the brain entirely. A stimulus is detected, a nerve is triggered, and before you even know what's happening, your body has already responded. This efficiency is essential. It keeps you safe. It keeps you moving. It keeps you whole. But sometimes the reflex has no urgent purpose. Sometimes it's a leftover motion, a check-in, a quiet reminder that your spine is still at work, always adjusting, always smoothing the transitions between what was and what's next. That's what makes the pea shiver so fascinating. It's not a warning, it's not a malfunction, it's a moment of invisible maintenance, a shiver to reset the systems, a soft ping in the network, a body saying, "We're done here, let's move forwards." And in that, there's no need for alarm, no need for curiosity laced with worry, just a marveling at how many things happen without you ever needing to understand them, at how often your body prepares you for the next moment before you even realize this one has passed. The spine has its own wisdom. It is not loud, it does not ask for credit, but it hums with purpose. And every so often, it lets you feel its work. Let yourself feel it now, not as a mystery, but as a gift, a flicker of electricity from a part of you that never sleeps, never rests, never stops listening. Your spine has secrets, and once in a while, it shares one with you, not in words, but in a single, strange, sudden shiver. That shiver, that flick of motion, that brief and curious disruption, marks an ending, not a grand one, not something people announce or celebrate, but your body knows. It keeps track, and endings, no matter how small, often come with gestures. This one is subtle. It doesn't close with a bow or a sigh or a long, slow stretch. It closes with a tremor, a ripple that signals something is complete. Completion is a strange sensation in the body. It's not just the absence of need, it's the presence of resolution, and your body doesn't always wait for your conscious mind to register that fact. It moves on its own. It finishes what it started, and in doing so, it sometimes leaves behind a trace, a final movement, a coded exhale, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. You might notice this in other places too. When you finish eating a comforting meal, your body shifts, not just because your stomach is full, but because the process has concluded. The hunger has ended. A chapter has closed. Or when you've been crying and the tears stop and your breath begins to steady, there's often a quiver, a pause, a sudden stillness that feels like your whole system pressing the reset button. Urination is quieter, more private, often less emotional, but it's still a cycle. It begins, it builds, and then it releases. And the shiver that follows might be nothing more than your body drawing the curtain across the moment, a closing gesture, a reset. You see, your body doesn't just run processes, it marks them. It carries you from one state to another, not with blunt shifts, but with small transitional signs. The tightening of muscles, the deepening of breath, the blink that breaks a stare, the stretch after stillness. These are signals, ways your body smooths the passage between now and next. And sometimes, that smoothing comes in the form of a shiver. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It doesn't mean your system is misfiring. Quite the opposite. It may mean that your system is remarkably intact, that it's fluent in transitions, that it's capable of ending things completely, not in silence, but in motion. We tend to think of closure as something emotional. We imagine breakups, goodbyes, endings of chapters and jobs and years. But the body had its own kinds of closure, quiet, rhythmic, cellular, the kind you don't speak about, but that you still feel. A shiver is one of them. And this one, this odd post-P twitch, might just be the body's gentle period at the end of a small, invisible sentence. A reminder that even the smallest acts have structure. Even the simplest moments deserve a kind of exit. It's easy to forget how many systems just completed a task. Your bladder muscles contracting, your pelvic floor relaxing, your diaphragm softening, the gentle increase in parasympathetic tone, the balance of fluid regulation, all happening in concert. And when it ends, your body doesn't merely go silent. It replies to itself, like a gentle nod from one internal system to another. That reply is the shiver. Of course, it doesn't happen every time. That's part of what makes it so mysterious. You don't get to summon it, you don't get to predict it. It comes unannounced, and then it disappears as quickly as it arrived. But when it does, you can think of it not as an error, not as something to analyze too deeply, but simply as a soft closing door, a door that opens again the moment you turn toward the sink, or step back into the room, or blink your eyes against the hallway light, and you might not remember it. It might already have faded, but for a split second, your body marked a moment. It completed a cycle. It signed its name beneath a task completed. It's comforting, isn't it? That your body holds these rituals, small, mechanical, often unseen, to keep your life moving forward. That even the most mundane experience is quietly bookended by something so beautifully automatic. We crave closure in many forms, the kind that helps us sleep at night, the kind that lets us release tension, the kind that says, you may move on now, and your body gives it to you again and again in ways you don't always notice. The shiver is just one of those ways, a micro ritual, a hidden semaphore, a tiny hand wave from the nervous system as it switches gears. And maybe it's nothing more than that. No deep symbolic meaning, no evolutionary alarm, just a flourish, like the last flick of a paintbrush after the picture is already complete. You don't need to capture it. You don't need to hold it. Just noticing it, just allowing it to exist, is enough. So next time it visits, let it come and go. Let it speak its quiet message and vanish into the air like a candle blown out. The task is done, the process has ended, and your body, reliable and elegant and strange, is already preparing for the next moment. Let it. Let yourself rest in that in between space where something has finished and something else hasn't yet begun. That's where the shiver lives, not in the act, not in the memory, but in the transition, and it is yours. The moment you stand, everything shifts, not just your feet or your gaze, but your entire inner world realigns. Blood redistributes, muscles adjust, pressure gradients change across your body like tides adjusting to a new moon. You may not feel most of it. You may simply move on, wash your hands, or step back into the hallway. But beneath the calm surface, something intricate is happening, a rebalancing prompted by gravity's quiet hand. After you've released, especially while standing, your body goes through a subtle recalibration. Fluids have moved, posture has changed, internal pressures have dropped or risen, and suddenly your nervous system has some work to do. It must reacquaint you with the force pulling you toward the earth. It must remind your muscles to hold you upright, to stabilize your vision, to keep your circulation flowing steadily. And sometimes, in that precise moment, just as the final release ends and gravity resumes its quiet influence, a shiver arrives. That sudden twitch may be more than just nerves resetting. It may be the nervous system giving itself a little shake, a brief coordination signal to tighten the muscles, to gather tone, to signal. We're back under load now. You were light for a moment, inward, soft, suspended in a state of letting go. But now your body returns to form, to upright, to tension, to structure. This adjustment may be especially noticeable because of the contrast. You were just in a parasympathetic state, relaxed, open, slightly vulnerable, but gravity doesn't care how calm you were. It keeps pulling. It asks your blood to pool in your legs, your lungs to lift, your spine to bear weight again. And so the body listens. It adapts. It flickers. The P shiver in this framing is almost like a shrug from the spine, a rapid communication between your posture muscles and your internal pressure systems. It's your body's way of saying, all right, let's lock everything back into place. There are small studies, quiet ones, that suggest standing urination, more common among men, may correlate with a higher chance of experiencing the shiver. But even without definitive data, the idea feels true in the body. When you stand to release, you remain upright while in a relaxed state, which is a bit of a paradox. You're letting go, but you're also balancing. You're exposed, but also holding tension. The systems overlap, intersect, contradict, and perhaps the shiver emerges from that contradiction. For those who sit, the response may be different. The spine is supported, the blood flow less disrupted, the postural shifts gentler, the body doesn't need to recalibrate as dramatically, and so the shiver may not always come, or it may come later, or it may come softer. It's fascinating how much the human body responds to posture. A simple change in position alters everything, from hormone regulation to breathing patterns to the speed of your thoughts. Gravity, though silent, is persuasive. It never lets go. And after you've finished peeing, which itself involves internal muscle contractions, bladder compression, and coordinated sphincter relaxation, the final moment may simply be a jolt of recentering, a muscular pulse that reminds your body that you are vertical again, that you are a column of fluid and bone and pressure, returning to full attention. The sensation may be brief, but it's intense because it's so unexpected. It disrupts your calm. It pulses through your back or neck, and then it's gone, leaving behind only a trace of surprise. Maybe you blink, maybe you smile, maybe you think, that again? And your body, with all its wisdom, doesn't answer. It just continues, still standing, still balanced, still carrying you forward, as it always has. What's curious is how this shiver often feels like it doesn't belong, like it's a foreign movement that doesn't fit into the logic of what you just did. But when you look closer, when you listen more carefully, you realize it fits perfectly. It is the seam that connects two postures, two states, two systems. We are creatures of balance, not just in terms of motion, but in every function: sleep and wake, hunger and fullness, action and rest. And the body loves balance so much that when it finds itself at the edge of imbalance, even briefly, it sends a signal. A shiver, perhaps, is just one of those signals, a small recalibration done with no urgency and no warning. A way to say, we're shifting, we've completed one cycle and are moving into the next. Some might compare it to a dog shaking off water, a full body contraction that resets their senses. But for you, it's smaller, less dramatic, more like a flicker behind your rib cage, more like a gust of wind catching a curtain for a second before it settles again. And you don't need to do anything about it. That's the beauty of it. It's handled, managed, executed by systems you don't need to oversee. You can simply notice it. Observe the moment when gravity calls you back, when your body answers without hesitation, when muscles realign and blood shifts and breath finds its pattern again. You return to balance. You stand, you move forward. The shiver, then, isn't a disruption. It's a doorway, a return to symmetry, a bodily exhale in motion. Let yourself feel it as such. Not a flaw, not a glitch, but a pause that resets the frame, a note in the quiet music your body plays every day, and then carry on. As if nothing happened, because really, in the grand orchestra of you, it was just one small symbol, just enough to remind you that the show continues. By now, you've probably noticed something quietly curious, a question tucked behind the odd shiver, waiting patiently like a coat left hanging by the door. Why, it seems to ask, does this happen more often to men? It isn't just an impression. Anecdotally, men report this shiver far more frequently. Some even expect it. Others joke about it, name it, nod knowingly when it's brought up. And while science hasn't settled on one universal explanation, there are a few gentle clues that drift up from anatomy, posture, and nervous wiring, soft threads we can trace tonight, not to define, but to understand. Start with the shape of things. The male body, by design, often voids urine while standing. This posture, upright, relaxed, exposed, invites complexity. The muscles of the abdomen and pelvic floor must coordinate with care. Gravity pulls downward, The bladder compresses, the urethra elongates. The whole system must cooperate without tension, without resistance. And when the stream ends, everything shifts. The body returns to tone, muscles re engage, blood redistributes, posture tightens, and the nervous system toggles out of its parasympathetic lull. For men, that toggle from the calm openness of release to the firm readiness of standing again may feel sharper, more abrupt, more noticeable. Women, by contrast, often sit while voiding. This seated position provides support to the spine, relaxes the hips, and limits the vertical changes in blood pressure and gravity's influence. The posture is inherently more stable, less drastic in its transition from rest to readiness, and so, perhaps, less likely to provoke a system wide flicker. But it's not just about posture. Inside the nervous system itself, there are distinctions, not better or worse, not stronger or weaker, simply different. The male sympathetic nervous system often displays heightened responsiveness to certain physiological changes, especially those involving pressure regulation and internal warmth. This system, the one responsible for alertness, tension, readiness, is also the one most associated with the shiver. And if it's more sensitive, more active in men during transitional moments, then perhaps the reflex is just more prone to firing. Then there's the pathway itself. The nerves responsible for bladder control and pelvic muscle coordination originate in the spinal cord, specifically the sacral and lumbar regions. These are places where a symphony of other nerves meet, those responsible for posture, movement, balance, and sensation in the legs and lower back. In men, the length and complexity of the urethra, a longer path with more internal control points, means these nerves must travel a bit farther, coordinate a bit more. A longer system means more space for flickers to arise, more chances for overlap, for small electrical echoes to trigger nearby muscles into brief, reflexive movement. Of course, you don't feel any of this while it's happening. You don't consciously monitor your pelvic nerves or note the synaptic spacing between your lumbar reflex arcs, but your body does, quietly, faithfully, every time, and perhaps, occasionally, it misfires, or maybe it fires exactly as designed, a shiver to recalibrate, to tighten, to mark the return from release. There are softer, stranger theories too, ones that drift more toward cultural observation than biological structure. Some suggest that men, socially conditioned to be attuned to physical control, strength, posture, readiness, may simply be more aware of a disruption in those patterns. The shiver, brief and involuntary, draws attention because it contrasts sharply with the usual command. Where men are taught to hold, to brace, to contain, a sudden automatic twitch feels like a betrayal, or at the very least, a curiosity, and so it gets noticed, named, shared with a quiet laugh. Women may feel it, too, of course. They may have their own versions, subtler or less discussed, or perhaps the reflex presents differently, in timing, intensity, or sensation. The body is a vast and varied place. No two nervous systems are precisely alike, and gender is not a switch, but a spectrum woven through with biology, experience, posture, and habit. Still, it's fair to say that for many men, this shiver is a familiar visitor, a small postscript at the end of a routine act. It doesn't arrive every time, but when it does, it is unmistakable, fleeting, inevitable, and harmless. That's the most important part. The pea shiver isn't a warning, it isn't a symptom. It's simply a pattern, an echo from inside. It may reflect anatomy, or gravity, or the nervous system's brief hiccup as it changes roles. Or maybe, as with so many things in the human body, it's a combination of causes, layered, overlapping, working together quietly to create a single, strange, forgettable moment. But forgettable doesn't mean unworthy of notice. Quite the opposite. Moments like these, strange, brief, bodily, they remind you that you are not a machine. You are full of oddities, full of transitions. You are porous, responsive, shaped by things you rarely see or choose. And the shiver, whether it's yours or not, whether it comes often or not at all, is part of that shared, strange inheritance. A reflex passed down from bodies that stood before us, that lived in forests and caves and early cities, that listened to their nerves without knowing their names. So when it happens again, if it happens again, just smile. Feel it for what it is, not a glitch, but a rhythm, not a mistake, but a motion. And let it pass through you like wind, unexpected, brief, natural, then carry on as those before you did. But what if the shiver doesn't start in the spine? What if it begins higher, softer, deeper, not in the tangle of nerves below, but in the charged silence above, in the brain? Imagine your brain as a sky, vast and layered, not empty, but full, thick with currents, clouds of thought, flashes of reflex, slow moving breezes of memory, and sometimes a storm, not loud or visible, not the kind with thunder and lightning, but a storm of sparks, of electrical patterns, a quiet burst of activity that crosses your awareness like the shadow of a bird. The brain is, in every moment, electrical, even now, as you lie still. It hums with activity, billions of neurons firing, relaying, pausing, whispering. Some of these firings are intentional, directed, like a hand reaching for a cup. Others are reflexive, automatic, sent off from deep structures that don't wait for your permission. And sometimes, in the shift from one bodily state to another, from relaxed release to alert posture, those neurons fire in unexpected ways. A pea shiver might just be one of those unexpected flashes, a microburst in the brain's electrical weather. Picture the moment. Your body has just let go. Your parasympathetic system has done its job. Muscles relaxed, tension eased, bladder emptied. Then, as the sympathetic system comes online again, ready to return you to your usual rhythm, something surges upward, a signal, a flicker. Maybe it doesn't even originate in the bladder or the spine. Maybe it's a feedback loop that climbs upward, should bark in the midbrain, in regions like the periaqueductal gray, places involved in processing both physical sensation and autonomic function. Or maybe the hypothalamus sends a ripple outward, reactivating systems that were momentarily subdued. And maybe, just maybe, that ripple doesn't stop where it's supposed to. Maybe it jumps, like static on an old radio. It crosses into nearby circuits, motor circuits, reflex pathways. A few rogue sparks find their way to the muscles in your shoulders, your back, your neck, and suddenly, there it is, the shiver. It lasts less than a second, but the sensation is strong because it's full body, because it was broadcast like a radio wave, not targeted like a message. It catches your attention, and then it fades. Your brain goes on, the signals recalibrate, the weather clears. Electrical storms don't need to be big to be noticeable. A single neuron firing in the right place at the right time can move your finger or change your heart rate or make your eyes blink. And when these signals come in clusters, however brief, however benign, they can move more than just a thought. They can move the body. Scientists sometimes call these brief, widespread activations startle like reflexes, though the term feels too sharp for what we're describing. Startles come with fear. This is different. This is a ripple without alarm, a startle without a start. You're not afraid, you're not cold, you're just shifting, and your brain, that vast conductor of everything, simply overcompensates. It's not a flaw, it's not a disorder, it's just part of how the brain learns to turn systems off and on again, like testing the lights after a blackout, just to make sure everything is still connected. And perhaps that's what the shiver really is, a systems check. The brain, ever careful, ever busy, takes a moment after urination, after that brief, relaxed state, to wake everything back up. Heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tone, and in doing so, it sends a few sparks farther than intended. Not dangerous, not abnormal, just vivid. You might not remember most of your bodily transitions. You don't recall every time your pupils dilate or your blood vessels constrict. But this electrical twitch, it's more noticeable because it moves you, because it touches the muscles along your spine, the core of your body, the seat of your attention. That's why it stays with you. That's why, even hours later, you remember it happened. You remember the little shiver, and if you think about it as a brain-born flicker, it becomes something almost poetic. The mind gently waking the body, like a hand brushing the shoulder of someone who's dozed off. Time to move again, time to rise, not harshly, not suddenly, but with a shimmer, with a whisper made physical, and this possibility that the shiver is not spinal, not muscular, not entirely autonomic, but cerebral, a blip in your own neural weather that makes it even more fascinating because it means the feeling isn't just a bodily event. It's a full body expression of a half thought, a neural shrug, a system wide handshake, your body and your brain reuniting. Hey, it says, in the language of nerves, let's get going again. So you do. You zip your pants. You flush. You wash your hands. You carry on, but something in you, however faint, remembers the shimmer, that brief flick that began not in your fingertips, but in the starlit sky of your own mind. And you smile, maybe. Because how often does the brain send signals strong enough to tickle your spine? How often does a moment so small feel so alive? You don't need to understand it fully. You don't need to track the current through your neurons like a map. You just need to feel it, just once. That strange electric hello, and know it's part of you, always has been, always will be. There's a softness in letting go of needing every answer, a quiet comfort in simply allowing the body to do what it does, even when it surprises you, even when it makes you shiver for no clear reason, right there in the middle of a bathroom visit. And maybe, just maybe, that surprise is part of the gift, part of what makes the human body feel not just functional, but almost playful, because sometimes the body is funny, not in the way of punchlines or rehearsed jokes, but in how it stumbles through its own reflexes with such earnestness. It hiccups, it sneezes, it gives you goosebumps when there's no cold. It makes your stomach growl during quiet meetings, and your eyelids twitch at the worst times. It forgets to swallow until your throat feels tight, or sends a chill up your spine when you're doing absolutely nothing remarkable. And then there's the pea shiver, strange, sudden, and completely unnecessary, but strangely delightful. The kind of thing that makes you pause and smile, not because it's important, but because it's unexpected, because it breaks the pattern in a way that feels oddly human. It's easy to think of biology as precise, logical, rigid, but the more closely you look, the more quietly you listen, the more you begin to hear the little jokes it leaves behind, the bits of comic timing embedded in your reflexes, the way your body sometimes answers questions you weren't asking. The shiver, in this way, becomes a kind of punchline, a nervous system one liner. It doesn't require an audience, it doesn't explain itself, it just arrives, perfectly timed, and disappears before you can say, "Wait, what?" That's part of what makes it so charming, because even if the shiver has real biological roots, and surely it does, that doesn't mean it has to be entirely serious. It can be both, meaningful and silly, functional and odd. It can make you laugh in the middle of an ordinary moment. And that laughter, that smile, might be just as important as any explanation. After all, laughter itself is biological. It's a muscle reflex, a breath pattern, a release of tension wrapped in rhythm and sound, and it, too, often shows up without warning. A word hits you just right, a look, a memory, and suddenly your diaphragm tightens and your chest expands and something spills out that wasn't there before. So maybe that's what the shiver is, a cousin to laughter, not built from amusement, but from transition, a brief, embodied ha that no one else hears. And isn't that sort of wonderful? That your body doesn't always behave predictably, that, even within the soft rituals of everyday life, there are moments of delightful nonsense, not embarrassing, not alarming, just funny in the gentlest sense. A reminder that you don't need to take yourself quite so seriously. You are, after all, a creature of quirks. You hum when you're focused. You touch your face when you're nervous. You misplace your keys in the fridge and forget why you walked into a room. You talk to yourself in the mirror, laugh in your sleep, twitch as you're falling into dreams. You do 1,000 little things every day that make no strategic sense, and yet, somehow, they're all part of what makes you you. The pea shiver belongs to that family of oddities, a quiet expression of embodiment, a reflex that, in its small absurdity, reminds you, hey, you're alive, you're here. Isn't that a bit funny, too? There's no harm in finding joy there, in letting yourself smile when your body acts a little strange, in thinking, well, that was unexpected, and going about your day a little lighter, because that lightness matters. That moment of delight, of laughter without reason, it balances the weight of everything else. It gives you a space to breathe, a soft pause in the pattern. And if the body, in its wisdom, has built in ways to create those pauses, if it's wired with reflexes that accidentally make us giggle, then maybe biology isn't just functional. Maybe it's gently mischievous, mukes too. So the next time you feel that shiver, that tiny spine tingling twitch, allow yourself the smallest chuckle. Let it be absurd. Let it be unexplained. Let it be, just for a moment, a gift of surprise in an otherwise ordinary routine, because that, too, is science. The science of being alive, of noticing without naming, of laughing without reason, of feeling the strange dance of your own nervous system and thinking, that was weird, with a grin. You don't need a textbook to justify it. You don't need a graph or a study or a detailed anatomical diagram. You just need to let the moment pass through you like a private joke between your spine and your brain, one that no one else hears but you. And somehow that might be the best kind of joke. The one that's never explained, never overstated, just delivered softly between systems, a tremor, a breath, a smirk, then silence. Just you again, standing there, breathing, moving on, lighter than before. Long before laboratories and textbooks, long before anyone knew the word autonomic, people still had bodies, and those bodies still twitched, trembled, fluttered, and sometimes, yes, shivered. The pea shiver, strange as it seems, may not have always had a name, but that doesn't mean it went unnoticed. People observed, they always have, especially when something happened that didn't quite make sense. And so you wonder, did anyone ever talk about it? Not loudly, perhaps, not in the way they spoke of weather, illness, or love, but maybe quietly, among families or friends, in bathhouses or around fire pits. Maybe someone tilted their head and said, "Did you feel that? That little chill?" And maybe someone else nodded knowingly, amused. Most cultures don't record such tiny moments. They don't write them into history books or carve them into stone. But that doesn't mean they aren't there, woven into the private rituals of daily life, in the way people treat the body, in what they whisper when something odd passes through them. You might not find a myth about the pea shiver, but you'll find stories of tingles and chills, of unexplained tremors, of spirits passing through the body when someone's guard is down. In some traditions, a sudden shiver means a ghost has brushed past. In others, it means someone far away is thinking of you, or that a truth has just been spoken. Isn't it interesting how often these sensations, physical, fleeting, inexplicable, are wrapped in stories? As if we've always needed something soft to hold on to when our bodies do something strange. As if the mystery invites metaphor, there's poetry in that impulse, not to dissect the sensation, but to make it meaningful, even if the science has yet to fully explain the pea shiver. Culture, in its quiet, roundabout way, has already given it space to exist. Maybe not by name, but by pattern. In many cultures, there are unwritten customs around bodily functions: when, where, how they're done, and even how they're felt. Some societies treat them as private and sacred. Others find humor in their rhythms. Still others attach rituals of cleansing, of transition, of rebalancing. You'll find traditions where people wash their hands, not just for hygiene, but as a spiritual reset, where certain postures are favored during elimination to encourage alignment, where prayers are offered before and after as a way of thanking the body for its quiet work. And perhaps in some of these, there's a moment, unspoken, unrecorded, when someone feels a shiver and simply accepts it as part of the ritual. The idea of bodily closure isn't new, nor is the concept of the body signaling completion. Ancient physicians believed in humors and vapors, in the flow of internal energies, and even though their maps of the body were more symbolic than scientific, they understood that sensation mattered, that when something passed through you, it left a trace. In Japanese bath culture, for instance, the process of cleansing is full of intentional transitions. The body is warmed, relaxed, emptied, rinsed, then slowly returned to balance. Each stage is marked, not just physically, but emotionally. Perhaps if the pea shiver happened there, it would be seen not as strange, but as a sign that the body was realigning, a ripple of return. In parts of rural Europe, old sayings still exist for strange sensations: a sudden cold through the back, a twitch in the hands, a buzz in the feet. These weren't necessarily seen as medical events, but as part of the body's dialogue with the world. You felt something odd? Of course you did. The world is odd too, so maybe the pea shiver fits here. A moment that resists a categorization, but not acknowledgement. Something familiar enough to ignore, but curious enough to remember. You might not find the term in folk medicine texts, but you may find it in the margins, in the way someone chuckles after feeling it, in the shared glance between two people exiting a public restroom, in the brief, shared experience of a sensation that has no language, only reaction, in a way that makes it even more human, more universal. No matter the time or place, people have always noticed when the body surprises them, always looked for a story to match the feeling, always tried, in quiet ways, to make the strange feel less lonely. And when you think about it like that, the pea shiver becomes more than just biology. It becomes folklore in motion, a myth that was never written down because it never needed to be, a private quirk that lives in generations of bodies, passed down not through genes or journals, but through lived experience. You felt it. So have millions of others, maybe even everyone. And yet, almost no one talks about it unless prompted. And when they do, their face changes. They laugh. They widen their eyes. They nod, relieved. Oh, you feel that too? That moment, that laugh, that nod is culture. That's where tradition begins, in shared strangeness and subtle recognition. So even if your ancestors didn't write poems about the pea shiver or assign it a deity, they likely felt it. They likely paused. They likely wondered. And in that wonder, they were just like you, standing between ritual and reflex, between function and story. You're part of that lineage now, a quiet participant in a history of small, strange feelings, a witness to the body's ongoing dialogue with itself. And maybe that's all the meaning you need, not an answer, but a thread, one that stretches backward into generations of wondering and forward into a future where someone else, one day, will feel the same shiver and smile. For all that we've uncovered, all the theories we've floated like paper boats across calm, reflective waters, There remains this simple truth. No one knows exactly why the pea shiver happens. Not completely, not definitively, not in the way science tends to like. And there's something oddly comforting about that. Because science, for all its instruments, its data, its clever acronyms, and carefully controlled studies, doesn't always have a tidy place for the things that flutter across our awareness and vanish before we can catch them, especially things like this: small, harmless, inconsistent, too brief to track, too common to alarm, too personal to document, without 100 different variations. Some researchers have tried, of course. You can find scattered mentions across medical forums and neuroscience journals. You can read about autonomic rebalancing, spinal reflex arcs, sympathetic activation, and thermoregulatory muscle responses. You can even find theories linking the shiver to vasovagal responses or to tiny postural corrections in response to standing after release. But what you won't find is consensus. There's no gold standard study, no widespread agreement, no elegant paper that ties everything up with a bow and says, here, this is what it is. Because sometimes science meets its match in the mundane, in the things that seem too small to matter, until you realize how persistent they are, how universally they appear, how memorable they become in the quiet of a private moment. You may think science is uncomfortable with not knowing, but in truth, science was born from not knowing. It grows not from certainty, but from wonder, from noticing something strange, a twitch, a ripple, a shiver, and resisting the urge to ignore it, from asking again, even when the answer doesn't come easily. That's why the pea shiver matters, not because it's dangerous, not because it demands a cure, but because it's a reminder that you're still connected to mystery, not just out in the stars or beneath the sea, but inside your own skin. And how lovely is that? That the body, so familiar and mapped and measured, can still offer up surprises, that it can still say, you don't know everything, you might never. And instead of panic, you feel a kind of peace, as if the unanswered question is a warm hand on your shoulder, guiding you gently into curiosity. There's something freeing about letting a question remain open, something calming about realizing that not every sensation has to be understood to be appreciated. Some can simply be felt, noticed, smiled at, and left alone. That's the kind of science this is, not the kind that races toward conclusions, but the kind that walks, slowly, quietly, with bare feet across a floor that still creaks in places. This science doesn't require graphs. It doesn't need a control group. It just needs a body and a moment, and a mind willing to listen. You might imagine a scientist, alone in a quiet room, stepping back from their instruments, blinking once, and smiling. Because the pea shiver, for all its simplicity, has stumped the best of them. Not because it's complex, but because it's ordinary. And the ordinary is often the hardest to pin down. It happens when you're not paying attention. It doesn't linger long enough for measurement. It doesn't occur every time. It doesn't cry out to be studied. It simply arrives, performs, and exits without explanation. That makes it nearly impossible to test in a lab. How do you recreate something that only happens unpredictably, only lasts a second, and can't be reliably described? And yet, people talk about it, They remember it, they recognize it instantly when it's mentioned. That recognition is data, too, just a different kind. A data of human experience, of shared story, of bodies in sync with one another, even when they don't realize it. Perhaps one day we'll have better tools, real time neural imaging that can pinpoint the very instant of transition, ultra sensitive muscle scanners that catch the flutter before it fades. Maybe one day we'll map this reflex down to the millisecond and the mystery will dissolve into certainty. But maybe not. Maybe it will remain what it is, a small, harmless ghost of a question that science has brushed against, but never fully held. And that's okay, because not everything needs to be held. Some things are better left drifting, like a snowflake on a warm palm, like a breeze through a window, like a shiver that catches you just once, then leaves you wondering. You can love science and still love wonder. You can respect inquiry and still find peace in uncertainty. You can say, we don't fully know, and feel not frustration, but joy. Because when science pauses, when it shrugs gently and smiles at a mystery, it's not a failure, it's an invitation to stay curious, to ask softly, to observe without demanding, to treat your own body as a place worth wondering about, not just fixing or explaining, but noticing. So notice. Notice the way your shoulders feel right now, the weight of your limbs, the hum in your chest. Notice the last time you felt a shiver, how it surprised you, how it left behind a sense of being quietly alive. You're part of that moment, part of that study, part of that question that science has yet to answer and may never answer fully. You are the subject and the story, the mystery and the witness, and that is more than enough. There's a particular stillness that comes after release, not just physical, but emotional, a kind of openness, spaciousness, like the echo of a long exhale that lingers in the air after the breath itself has ended. Your body, having completed something it's been quietly preparing for, now settles. There's nothing more to do, nothing more to hold. And in that brief pause, you enter one of the most natural, most ancient states a body can know, the art of letting go. It's easy to forget how much of your life is spent holding tension in your shoulders, holding your breath when anxious, holding your tongue in a difficult conversation. Even your bladder, though you don't often think of it, is a vessel of holding, a quiet manager of patience, a reminder that the body knows how to wait. But when you finally let go, something shifts, not just in your muscles, but in your whole sense of being. You're not just emptying liquid, you're emptying effort. The unconscious strain dissolves. The nervous system, long balancing between alert and ease, dips gently into surrender, and even if the moment only lasts a few seconds, it carries weight. The pea shiver, when it comes, may be a part of this release, a punctuation, not a reaction to discomfort or urgency, but to the sheer act of transition, the change from holding to not holding, a tiny reverberation, as if the body is saying, ah, there. You might not notice this kind of surrender elsewhere, but it lives in many places. The final breath before sleep, the quiet pause after a long laugh, the stillness that follows a storm, the unclenching of hands after tension fades. In each of these, the body lets go of something it had been grasping, perhaps without even knowing it. Letting go isn't dramatic. It doesn't need to be. It's gentle, familiar, sometimes so quiet that you only notice it by what's missing: the tightness, the urgency, the readiness to act. When those disappear, what's left behind is space, and in that space, the body responds, sometimes with a sigh, sometimes with a softening, sometimes, yes, with a shiver, not because anything is wrong, but because the letting go is complete. There's a wisdom in that shiver, a kind of full body acknowledgement. It might begin in your spine, but it speaks to your entire self, a single, momentary ripple that says, "You've done what you needed to do. The task is over. You may rest now." In the stillness that follows, you may feel unusually present, as if your awareness has dropped back into the body, as if your mind, so often drifting elsewhere, is gently called home by the quiet. That's the power of release, not just physical, but neural, emotional, even symbolic. To let go is to return. And yet, we rarely treat these small moments with the reverence they deserve. We rush past them, dismiss them, call them weird. But maybe they're more than that. Maybe they're reminders, markers, embodied transitions that bring us back to the truth of the body's intelligence. It's so easy to live in tension. The world encourages it. Fast thoughts, fast movements, deadlines and alerts, and the hum of constant doing. But the body remembers stillness. It craves it. And every now and then, it offers you a gift, a reminder of how to release. The pea shiver may be part of that offering, a signal not of mystery, but of mastery, your body completing a cycle and giving itself permission to reset. A reset not of mind, but of sensation, of presence, of balance. And it's not only the body that responds. Sometimes your thoughts quiet down afterward, your breath changes, you feel a little more like yourself, not because anything dramatic has occurred, but because something small has ended well. Release brings clarity in a body that has learned to hold too much, to wait too long, to grit its teeth through the ordinary. A successful release is a kind of celebration. The shiver? It might just be the applause. There's no need to dramatize it. There's no need to make it mystical, but also there's no need to ignore it. Let it be what it is, a gesture of closure, a moment of yes, a signal that you are allowed to relax. Think about how often you resist that invitation, how often you move too quickly from one thing to the next, never noticing the endings, never letting the body mark them. But this little twitch, it insists on being felt. And maybe that insistence is its purpose. Maybe that's the art of letting go. Not just releasing, but noticing that you did. Noticing the space that follows, the quiet afterward, the breath that arrives a little deeper, the ground that feels a little more solid beneath your feet. You don't need to ritualize it, but maybe next time you'll linger a second longer, just long enough to feel the air on your skin, the coolness on the back of your neck, the strange stillness that arrives not from stopping, but from completing. Letting go isn't about loss. It's about movement, about cycles, about the natural rhythm of in and out, hold and release, tension and ease. Your body already knows how to follow that rhythm. The shiver, if it comes, is just a reminder. a soft exclamation point at the end of a sentence your body wrote for you. And then you carry on, lighter, emptier, more yourself, until the next time. Even after the shiver fades, something in you holds on to it. Not the moment, exactly. Not the context or the time of day, or what shirt you were wearing, or which hand turned the faucet, but the feeling, that flick of awareness, that strange electric ripple that meant something. The brain doesn't always archive events like files in a cabinet. It remembers experience more like watercolor, the color, the warmth or cold, the echo of something real but slightly smudged. It remembers how things felt, and feelings, more than facts, shape what we carry forward. So maybe that's why the pea shiver lingers in memory long after it's gone. Not because it's dramatic or essential, but because it's unique. Because it stands out in a sea of sameness. You use the bathroom dozens of times a week, maybe hundreds, and almost all of those moments blur together, except the ones where something unexpected ripples through. It's not just about surprise, it's about sensation. When the shiver arrives, your brain flags it, not with alarm, but with curiosity. Remember this? It says, even if it doesn't explain why. And so you do. You remember it not as a timeline, but as a texture. That one time last week, or last year, or when you were a kid, and you felt that twitch, that chill, that odd little thrill at the base of your neck or down your back. You didn't know what it meant then. Maybe you still don't, but you remembered. The same thing happens with other bodily moments. A sudden ache before a storm, the flutter in your stomach before you speak, the way your fingers twitch as you fall asleep. The brain doesn't always file those sensations under important, but it often marks them as distinct, and distinction is its own kind of significance. Because when something stands out, it anchors. It gives your mind a place to land, even if that place is strange, even if it has no name, even if it serves no known function. Your brain has entire regions devoted to tracking sensation: the insula, the somatosensory cortex, the anterior cingulate. These areas don't just light up when you stub your toe or get goosebumps. They also encode emotional flavor. They remember what a sensation meant to you, not just what it was. So if the shiver made you laugh, it becomes a funny memory. If it caught you off guard, it might carry a charge of startlement. If it felt oddly satisfying, your brain may store it with a little note that reads, pleasant if mysterious. That emotional tagging is what brings the memory back later, not when you're trying to think of it, but when someone else mentions it, or when it happens again, and suddenly your mind lights up. Yes, that. I know that feeling. It's a quiet reunion between experience and recognition, and it doesn't just happen with shivers. The brain is full of these strange bookmarks, little neurological post-its left behind by the body's more vivid moments. Some are joyful, some confusing, some completely neutral, but persistent, like a melody that keeps playing even when you're not listening. That's why it doesn't matter whether the shiver has a purpose. The brain doesn't wait for function to form memory. It responds to rhythm, to novelty, to emotion, and the pea shiver, despite its size, checks all three. It's rhythmic, a twitch, a ripple, A brief, full body contraction. It's novel, unpredictable, rare enough to be notable, and it's emotional, if only because it interrupts a moment of calm with something odd and physical. That's enough. You don't need to explain it to remember it. You don't need to define it to feel its echo. That's the beautiful paradox of the brain. It's always collecting meaning, even from the meaningless, always tagging experience, even when it doesn't fully understand what it's tagging. It remembers how something felt, not always why it mattered. And this can be a comfort because it means your body doesn't have to justify itself. Your experiences don't need to be logical to be real. You can feel something strange, remember it, smile at it years later, and never know exactly what it was. That's not confusion, that's being alive. You are a collection of remembered feelings. The warmth of sunlight through a car window, the sting of a scraped knee, the shiver after letting go. These sensations don't need meaning, they just need space. And when they return, however quietly, however suddenly, when your brain pulls one from the shelf and says, "Here, remember this?" you can greet it with curiosity, not confusion. You can say, "Oh, that again," and let the moment pass through. No explanation required. That's how the brain works best. Not when it solves everything, but when it allows you to live inside questions. So the next time the shiver comes, quick, full, and gone before you can frame it, know that your brain will remember it, even if you don't. Not as a sequence or a definition, but as a feeling, a soft jolt wrapped in wonder. And maybe that's the only kind of memory you need, a felt thing, an unknown unknown. A little flag in the map of your body that says, something happened here. Even now, while you lie still, your body is alive with signals. They're not loud, not showy, just gentle pulses moving through you in layers, a soft tightening in your calf as it adjusts beneath the blanket, the faint stretch of your lungs expanding and retreating, a heartbeat not asking to be noticed, but beating nonetheless. These are the quiet instruments of your body's symphony. The pea shiver, if you were to name it musically, might be a cymbal crash, not the kind that rings through a concert hall, but a small one, sharp, brief, oddly placed, a percussive punctuation in a movement composed mostly of gentle hums. You don't expect it, it doesn't belong to the melody, and yet, when it happens, it fits in a way you can't explain. That's the strange beauty of being alive. So much happens inside you without orchestration from the conscious mind. Your body is conducting itself quietly every second. Tiny bursts of information ripple across nerves, bounce between organs, rise and fall without fanfare. It's not a performance. It's not a rehearsed piece. It's more like an improvisation, responsive, adaptive, just enough order to carry you through. And every now and then, one of those signals makes itself known. Like the shiver, it might be triggered by a convergence, a perfect momentary harmony of systems resetting themselves. The bladder signals its task is complete. The parasympathetic tone begins to lift. The spine tenses in preparation for posture. The hypothalamus nudges temperature control, and in the middle of that convergence, the ripple, not large, not dangerous, but enough. Enough to make you pause, to notice the body's spontaneous music, You don't have to know which system struck the note. Maybe it wasn't just one. Maybe it was a chords, overlapping signals, each harmless on its own, creating something briefly beautiful when played together. A coordinated burst that felt uncoordinated only because you weren't expecting it. And why would you? Most of the time, you don't feel these things. The quiet pulse of your liver filtering blood, the adjustment of your pupils in the dark, the slight shift in heart rate when you lie on your left side instead of your right. These are the unseen dances, subtle, seamless, but sometimes one dances through the curtain. The shiver is like that, not a disruption, but a solo, a brief passage that rises to the surface before disappearing again into the background score. And once you notice that, it becomes easier to notice everything else, the tiny vibrations, the muscle flutters, the inexplicable itches and sighs and adjustments that happen with no input from you. They are not random. They are the sound of life, not dramatic, not always rhythmic, but always present. Science often talks about these signals as noise, background activity, non essential output. But if you listen closely, you realize it's not noise at all. It's tone, texture, the kind of softness that reminds you that being alive isn't just an experience of big moments, but a series of small ones and strung together like lights. When one light flickers unexpectedly, like a shiver, you see the string behind it, and that string is your body, always humming, always playing. There's no need to turn this into something metaphysical. It doesn't need to be sacred to be meaningful. You're not required to interpret the shiver as a sign from the universe, but you are allowed to see it as part of something larger, a visible part of the invisible work your body is doing all the time. And when you feel it, you might also feel gratitude, not for the sensation itself, but for the reminder that you are still here, still functioning, still in tune, even if the music is odd sometimes. You don't conduct this orchestra. You are the instrument and the audience. And the more you notice, the richer the music becomes. There may be other moments when this awareness opens up, not just after urinating, but during stillness, during yawns, during that soft wave just before sleep takes you. In those times, too, your body plays louder for just a moment. A flutter, a breath that feels different, a sound in your chest that you didn't make. And then it's gone, but even as it fades, the memory of it remains, not as information, but as impression. The way you remember a chord, even if you can't name the notes. The way you remember a sunset, not by its exact color, but by how it made you feel. The shiver is one of those chords, not played often, not predictable, but memorable in a way you don't forget. And the next time it happens, maybe you'll smile, not because you understand it now, but because you've started to listen differently. You've stopped looking for answers and started hearing the whole piece. You've realized that this strange little reflex, this curious, delightful, awkward moment, is part of the music, and without it, the song would be just a little less complete. Let it play, let it pass, and then feel the stillness afterward, richer for the note that came before. You are a symphony, and you've just heard one of its smallest, strangest, most honest notes. So now, here you are, resting quietly at the edge of a question that never asked to be solved. Not really. The pea shiver, in all its suddenness and softness, has unfolded itself in front of you like a paper crane, delicate, familiar, and a little bit magical. And maybe, as your eyes grow heavier, you find yourself smiling, not because you understand it fully, but because you don't have to. There's something soothing in that, because not every mystery in the body needs to be cracked open and labeled. Some are meant to be felt, acknowledged, and let go. Some are too fleeting to be studied, but just long enough to be remembered. The pea shiver is one of those, a quiet echo of biology, wrapped in centuries of unnoticed repetition, folded into the hidden routines of everyday life. You've followed it now, across evolution, across cultures, across nervous systems and stories and studies that don't quite agree. You've peeked into the soft folds of the brain, into the quiet signals of the spine, and into the places where science gently shrugs and says, maybe, and that maybe is beautiful because the world doesn't end in answers. It unfolds in wonder, in noticing, in living with the question instead of chasing it. That's what the quiet scientist is all about, not just explaining, but inviting. Inviting you to settle into the warm, humming curiosity of your own body, to feel what it means to be made of tiny reflexes, quiet systems, and 1,000 processes you'll never control, but can always marvel at. The pea shiver came and went. You felt it, you wondered, and now it can rest. You don't have to wait for it to happen again. You don't need to catch it in the act. It's not a performance, it's just part of you. A tiny, harmless secret shared among humans across time, across generations, across bathrooms and bedrooms, and sleepy late night moments when something ripples unexpectedly down your spine. It might never be named in medical school. It might not make the textbooks or the tests, but it will stay in bodies, in memory, in quiet little chuckles when someone finally brings it up and everyone says, oh, yes, that. And maybe that's all the truth you need, that it happens, that it means something, even if that something shifts each time. That the mystery is part of the message, that your body, for all its mapped out parts and studied paths, still knows how to whisper to you in ways no one else can explain. Let that be enough. Let the ripple go. Let your thoughts quiet now, like a lake at dusk. The last light soft on the surface. No wind, no urgency. Just the slow, steady exhale of a world winding down. You've wandered gently through nerves and myths, across sensation and science, and into something softer, a feeling not meant to be held, but allowed. And maybe that's the point, in the end, that some knowledge doesn't shout. It rustles, it flickers, it trembles like a leaf catching wind for a heartbeat, then resting again. Your body does this. It has always done this. And you, lucky you, get to notice it every now and then. So as you lie here now, in the calm of your room, with your body just beginning to blur into sleep, remember, not every strange thing is a problem. Some are gifts, gentle, odd, passing gifts, like this one. Let the stillness gather around you now. Let the edges soften. Let the breath move without effort. Let your thoughts melt into the quiet between each sentence until they're just shapes, just clouds, just hush. You don't need to hold on to anything. The shiver is gone. The question is answered, not with facts, but with presence. And you are safe here, listening, drifting, returning. The symphony has quieted. The body is still, and you are already halfway to sleep.